I'm going to cover a topic here that I seem to get a lot of questions about, and that is reloading. Reloading for accuracy. It's very apparent to me that most people out here that are reloading, that's just about what they're doing, is reloading. Well, I'm a precision hand loader with a tremendous amount of years of experience loading hundreds of different cartridges over time, and I'm going to start here with this aspect. We all need to understand something, that there are bullets that are more accurate, I consider extremely accurate, and bullets that are just so-so. With that in mind, it should be obvious that if we are loading bullets that aren't that accurate a bullet in the first place, in most rifles, that we're not going to get the performance that we're looking for. So I'm going to focus on some specific bullets, a specific caliber here, and try to bring you up to speed here, what you need to do to maybe wring the accuracy out of your rifle. This is providing that everything's been done to a rifle that's necessary to get accuracy in the first place, such as properly bedded, properly mounted scopes, and one thing another, and also properly bench resting your rifle. We have a video on that. You can go to that for properly bench resting your rifle, which I find to be a tremendous aid to top accuracy with any load combination. Now, precision hand loading, we have to have all the necessary equipment to reload, and if we're going to look for accuracy, we need a chronograph. If you're loading and you don't have a chronograph, you're missing a great part of the whole spectrum here. Invest in a chronograph. There are chronographs that are reasonably inexpensive that you can purchase, and I've used Oiler chronograph for many years. I stick with that. It served me very well. It's more expensive, but it's a very good chronograph. And there are other advancements in chronographs since that point in time when those particular chronographs came on the market. Now I'm going to start right here. One of the most popular cartridges out here for hunting, and this seems to be clear across the country and into other parts of the world, is the 300 Winchester Magnum. I build, at this point in time, probably more 300 Winchester Magnums for people hunting all around the country, from hunting perhaps even white-tailed deer to considerably larger game, elk, moose, bear, one thing another. And properly loaded, this cartridge is capable of taking all this game in North America and most game in any other parts of the world, Africa and elsewhere. So there are certain aspects, as I said, to this reloading that will bring you more full spectrum to what you need to be doing. I choose, for the 300 Winchester Magnum, I invariably choose Norma brass or Winchester brass. The Norma brass may be a little bit more readily available. Norma has always made very precision, very precise brass that's of extremely high quality, and that's where I would start. I full length size my new cartridge cases to make sure that they're uniform, the necks are uniformed. You know, this brass sometimes is a little out around in the neck, so we need to size our cases. And once we've sized a few cases, we need to try those cases in our rifle to make double sure that new virgin brass sized, should undoubtedly go right in your rifle, without a doubt. And I always use a chamfer tool. I chamfer the inside of the case mouth lightly so that it doesn't have any edge. Most of this normal brass doesn't in the first place, but I do it anyway. And I always prime my cases with an individual priming tool. I don't use a reloading press to prime my cases. That can be done, but I use a hand priming tool, and I've used this particular hand priming tool for many, many years. There are various offerings for hand priming tools for you. Primers need to be seated, realistically 1,000 to a couple thousandths below the surface of the base of the case. That means that primer is seated fully to the bottom of the primer pocket. What this tells you, folks, is that when that firing pin strikes that primer, it's got a solid force to hit against. That primer can't move slightly. If those primers are seated completely to the bottom of the primer pocket, you see, and seated in such a way, and this is something that has been knowledge for many, many years, most of my lifetime, that our primers are dimensioned and our cases are dimensioned so that when primers are seated, that's how it comes out to being. Now, the next thing, we're shooting the 300 Winchester Magnum, so we need to choose a powder that's suited to this cartridge. Now, yes, you can go to your loading manual and you can find 10, 12, 15 listed powders for that cartridge. But look at the velocities that these powders provide for you with the top charges. Look at the charges. Look at the charge weights. And normally, most loading manuals indicate loading density of the case. The more densely that we load that case, that meaning that the more densely that we fill that case full with powder, the better results that we're going to have with that combination. And I have found that 2 powders shine, not that you can't use something else, but 2 powders shine and give you the top performance. Top performance to me is accuracy and velocity, both in combination. Now we could get accuracy, but our loads might be down a couple hundred feet a second. Well, if our loads are down a couple hundred feet a second, the 300 Winchester Magnum, then stick with the 30-06, folks. If you're going to load a Magnum, load it with the powder that's proper to give you the performance that you want. IMR 7828, specifically the regular 7828, not Super Shortcut. Super Shortcut is not the powder to be using, and we have been told that these powders are the same. They are not the same. The charge weight's not the same. The case filling ability volume-wise is not the same. So it is simply not the same. It's just plain and simple. If we don't have the same area taken up in the case by the powder, it's not the same powder. It's just plain and simple, and I've proved this out many, many different times. So 7828 and Hodgson's H1000, 2 tremendously good powders, and that should be all that you need are those 2 powders to wring this cartridge out. I always have on stock a very, very good supply of necessary primers and so forth, anything that I might possibly ever use. And I invariably start out with a Federal 215 primer or a Winchester large rifle primer. And what most people don't understand is that Winchester large rifle primer is very, very similar in its power to ignite fairly large volumes of slow burning powder. I always try both the primers, and I may even try other primers. For instance, a Remington 9.5 Magnum primer. I may try that. I may try the Federal 210 match primer. Those primers should cover anything that you want to do with this cartridge. And as far as the powder charges, depending on bullet weights, we're going to talk about various bullet weights here. I'm going to start here with 180 grain weight bullets. I feel that some of the very best game bullets and bullets in the accuracy department are the 180 grain Nosler Accubon, the 180 grain Barnes X triple shock bullets. That's a boat tail bullet. They're extremely accurate. Also, I use a lot of 180 grain Nosler partitions, and occasionally some 180 grain Swift Siroccos. And I have had absolutely bang up accuracy with all these bullets, with those two powders, with those two primers. And from experience, I find that most of the listed maximum charge weights for instance, almost any cartridge, including the 300 Winchester Magnum, I'll start about 2 grains below the maximum, and I'll come up a half a grain at a time, and I may end up right at what the maximum charge is. I might be a half grain over, and perhaps in instances I might even be a grain over what's listed. Now here's what we need to understand. Just because the loading manual lists something as maximum, that does not mean that it's a maximum load in your rifle. Rifles are as different as you and I, folks. And one rifle will accept certain powder charge, and another rifle will accept an entirely different charge, maybe several grains more, maybe even more than that. So working up a half a grain at a time, and I would say here that it is very important. I wouldn't load at all without having a 1" 10th micrometer to measure my case heads. You can go to one of my videos to see exactly how to measure cases with a 1" 10th graduation micrometer. And I use that micrometer to determine whether I have a working maximum load or not. A top working maximum load shouldn't go over about a half a thousandth of head expansion on the rear portion of the belt. And using this method will assure you that you have a combination that's going to work, that you've got a load combination that will give you the ability to perhaps load those cases 10 times or more. If you don't have a go-by, a gauge, to gauge those cases, such as this micrometer, you may find that after 2-3 loadings or something, all of a sudden now, your case may not, hold a primer tight. Well, that's because you've expanded your cases a little bit more. And that micrometer is going to tell you ahead of time, by following the 1/2 thousandths head expansion, that's where you need to stop. Now if you go to a full thousandths, or maybe a tenth or two over a full thousandths, you're going to find that probably after 4 or 5 loadings now, all of a sudden your primer is starting to become a little bit loose. Well, your best combinations in almost any rifle is going to be a load that's going to work out by using your micrometer at about a half a thousandths expansion. This is where I find that we get tight, very tight velocity spreads, close standard deviations in our velocity and accuracy. These things all go hand in hand. This pressure, the velocities, the uniformity of everything in combination with one another, the powder charge, the case, and the primer, and so forth. And years and years and years ago, I realized very, very early on, in just my very first few years of reloading ammunition, that if I could come up with a combination where I could seat my bullets reasonably close, say something closer than a 1/16 of an inch from the rifling, maybe up as close as 20 thousandths off the rifling, that this is where I had some of my best accuracy. And over the years, as I've built rifles, I build rifles for every aspect of performance. And velocity and accuracy come together when everything is right. Factories notoriously seat their bullets very, very deep in the cartridge cases to function through rifle actions, magazine boxes, and one thing and another. And when I'm building 300 Winchester Magnums and working with this, I want to work with a rifle that has the ability that has a magazine box ability to load to at least 3 and 3.600 long. Now, I may not load that long, but most of the time that I'm loading a 300 Winchester Magnum, depending on the bullets and one thing and another, I'm loading rounds out there that are about 3.450 to maybe 3.590 or something like that. That gets me fairly close to the rifling, and you've got to understand that some of these links that I'm throwing out here are because we're using fairly high ballistics coefficient bullets in some instances with long, slender plastic tips that add length to the bullet. It's an entirely different bullet than, for instance, a 180 Nosler partition type of a bullet. That bullet doesn't have the length, but it has the ability to get closer to the rifling. Because of that, the length doesn't restrict the ability to get your bullet out reasonably close to the rifling. And it's very foolish to load ammunition for your hunting rifle that's going to touch your lance. That's not what you want to do. This is not a competition accuracy game. We're talking about precision, fairly long distance accuracy out of the 300 Winchester Magnum. So, taking all these things into account, I'll seat my bullets, if I can, starting at around 20 or 30 off the rifling. I'll go from there, and I'll work my charges up a half a grain at a time, paying attention to my velocity spreads, see what I have, and the accuracy on the target, and the repeatability. And, I touched here just a moment ago on pressure. After we've been through all these aspects and done all these things, and we found a load, and we've used these cartridge cases 10, 12, 15 times, that in itself, if you've been paying attention to pressure, assures you that you've got a good maximum working load, a safe load, because the cases haven't expanded to not accept a primer. So I'm going to point out a couple of areas here. I find that as a rule with 78-28 and 180 grain bullets, my load's going to be somewhere between 76 and 78 grains of 78-28 in a 300 Winchester Magnum. Now, again, I'm not talking about extremely short cartridges. I'm talking about cartridges loaded out, with the bullets loaded out where they need to be. And this all works hand in hand. Now, the H1000, somewhere in the neighborhood between about 79.5 and 81.5 grains of H1000 is going to be probably the area that you're going to get your performance. Again, depending on your specific rifle. Don't compare your rifle you're working with at this moment with perhaps another rifle of your buddies, or maybe even another rifle that you have in that caliber. don't compare both of them. Each one of them are individuals. Don't say, well, this rifle will load this and I can load this rifle with a different powder charge. Well, yeah. This is always going to work out like this because things are different. Things are not the same. There's things that are not absolute. Chambers are not exactly the same. Barrel dimensions are not exactly the same. But taking things into account, those are the areas that I find that things work well. And once that I've got what I think is a very good load here, worked out with my chronograph, my micrometer, and my accuracy shooting at 100 yards, I'll move to a 300-yard target and do some verification. Do some verification in the accuracy department to see that that rifle that's shooting perhaps a 4/10 group is going to carry. In all fairness, it should be a rifle that'll shoot 1.200 at 300 because it's 3 times as far. I might mention that just a couple days ago I just finished a 300 Winchester Magnum, and the load that I worked out for that rifle, I shot a .182 group. Those are 3 shots in 182 thousandths. This happens. It doesn't happen all the time. And I might state that it was with H1000, and this happened to be with 165 grain Nosler Accubons. A little bit heavier barreled rifle, Sendero weight barreled rifle, extremely accurate, extremely uniform. And you're not going to find anything better than that. But as a rule, the rifles that I'm building are going to shoot at, on occasion, groups that are going to be that tight, somewhere in the 3s, the 4s, or around 5, around a half of an inch. And these accuracy indications that I'm mentioning, of course, with high quality, match quality barrels. And I always stick pretty much with the same barrels. I've tried just about everybody's barrels, and I've had a lot of good luck with a lot of barrels. There's some barrels that work better than others, and this is what you've got to understand. And there's various different methods of making barrels, and it's all about precision and uniformity. So I hope that for those of you that are been shooting your 300 Winchester Magnum and you've tried 4 powders and you've tried 4 bullets and all these other things, that maybe we can narrow this down for you, provided that everything else is okay with this rifle, and you're going to realize better accuracy from me basically helping you along the precision loading process to get you to where you want to go.